Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. Brian Kelly met with the media back on Saturday and had a few things to talk about. The first one, unfortunately, got some sick guys in the LSU football team. Had a stomach bug that kind of ran through the team. DJ Chester and Emory Jones missed time on Saturday, and Brian Kelly talked about that.
So we've had a bug going around, a lower GI bug through the O-line, and Emory was affected greatly from it today. You saw he was in and out. He probably shouldn't have been out there, but you couldn't keep him from practice. That's what he was suffering from. We sent him home. I don't know how Whit Weeks and West Weeks made it through practice. They had a similar bug. You know, we've sprayed the offices, we've cleaned them down, but you know, we're fighting that right now with a number of guys.
Better now than in 2 weeks. I very, very rarely get sick. That just doesn't happen all that often. But I did get sick a couple months ago. I got one of those stomach bugs that I hadn't probably had since like high school. Football practice was not an option for me. Like that was just not going to be an option. I don't know what these guys had, but for the Weeks brothers and Emory Jones to be out there with some sort of bug in that heat in pads dealing with that, that's something. I'll pass on that experience for sure. Offensive line, there were a couple more bites. Tyree Adams has been working as the second team left tackle, and I believe him to be the number 3 tackle on this team. I think either side, left to right, he would probably be the next man up should unfortunately anything happen to Will Campbell or Emory Jones. We'll knock on wood there. And Brian Kelly talked about his confidence in Tyree Adams.
You know, I thought he did some good things. You know, we're bouncing him around. He's playing tackle and guard. And so, you know, I think, you know, we like his athleticism. You know, we like him right now in I think, a developmental role where, you know, I think he's probably the next guy. He's still got a ways to go for consistency, but he's going to flash. We just got to get that to be more consistent.
Adams really looks the part when you go out to practice. I mean, he is long, he is lean, he moves very well. Like, he is a prototypical tackle type prospect. I mean, he's not Will Campbell, he's not first team All-American, but he's working towards being potentially the next left tackle at LSU. And I was curious to hear him talk about the fact that he would kind of be the next guy up no matter where. We have a piece up at LouisianaSports.net right now where I pulled the entire station and asked about the most indisposable player on LSU's roster outside of Garrett Nussmeier. Jacoby and Guillory got some thoughts there. I would tend to potentially agree with that. I threw Mason Taylor's hat into the ring. But Will Campbell got mentioned by a couple as well, because you realize if you take Will Campbell out, Emory Jones may go to left tackle, and maybe Tyree Adams goes to right tackle. Maybe they just plug Tyree Adams in at left tackle, where we've seen him working in camp. That would be a big step down, but you have to have guys ready to go on the offensive line. Like, you have to, because you can't play 13 games of football and not have some guys get dinged up on the offensive line. It's too physical. They're in too compromised a position, oftentimes getting rolled up on, that kind of thing. You've got to have depth at offensive line. And LSU's got a ton of talent, just a question of how quickly can those young guys get ready to play. Hopefully you don't need them, but the fact of the matter is that you very likely will, and Tyree Adams would be one of those guys. Garrett Dellinger is another guy that Brian Kelly was speaking about back on Saturday. Here's talk about his senior guard.
You know, we know each other, and we've had a relationship since we've gotten here over that, because I recruited him. So we knew each other like my first day here. You know, that was a guy that I knew. So, you know, I think we've had a relationship since day one. So that's kind of been nice. But having him as a guy that can play a couple of positions for us has been really important, you know, on that offensive line, because now you know that you got a guy that's got a lot of experience, a lot of snaps, played a lot of football, a lot of winning football for you. You know, the snapping doesn't come easy to him, but he's gotten really much more proficient at it. He was good today with it, a couple of low snaps, but I think he's feeling much more comfortable with it.
Remember, Dellinger was the starting center 2 years ago in the Florida State game in the Superdome. And when LSU went to the whole offensive line shake-up, they put Charles Turner in, and they put Emory Jones, the freshman, out at right tackle, and they did a lot of things between weeks 1 and week 2 to help the offensive line that just got whitewashed against Florida State in that game in New Orleans. So he's got experience playing center. My gut tells me if DJ Chester were to go down or wasn't playing well enough, that Dellinger could go in there and play center, and maybe you pull Ty Adams in there at guard. That may be something they do, as opposed to going to Cohen Eccles right away as a true freshman who's been working with the twos at center. So interesting. I hadn't seen Garrett Dellinger doing a lot of snapping, but he was doing that on Saturday, and Brian Kelly kind of alluded to the fact that, hey, he could be called upon to do that. Sticking with the offensive side of things, Chris Hilton is a guy that I think is primed for a monster year. I think he could be really, really good for LSU this year. His issue's never been talent, never really been technique. His issue's been staying healthy, and Brian Kelly talked about trying to be careful with Chris Hilton.
I think he'll be all right. It was an ankle. It wasn't Owen talked to me after. He said, I think it'd be best we just keep him out. So didn't seem to be, high ankle or something that would be affecting him for long term. Much more of about a precautionary ankle right now.
Chris Hilton has been in college for 3 full years. This is his 4th year. If he needs to sit down for a week to get ready to go in Vegas, then sit down for a week. Like, that's my deal. I realize that coaches want players to practice. Players want to be out there and practice. But this is a guy who's experienced. He's been in Cortez Hankton and Joe Sloan's offense now for 3 years. He understands where to be, what to do. He's got a ton of talent, and he's had a really good camp. If he is compromised in any way, or could re-aggravate that ankle in any way, like, there's just not a need to push it. And I think that's kind of what they're alluding to. That's kind of what the trainer's alluding to. Like, he's okay to sit down. So we'll see. We'll be back out there on Wednesday for practice, and we'll get a report and see if Chris Hilton is out there and running around going through things full speed. Garrett Nussmeier was a topic of conversation with Brian Kelly back on Saturday.
Yeah, I thought he did some pretty good things. I mean, there were a couple things in pressures that, he thinks he's got 52 timeouts. He takes timeouts when he wants to take a timeout. I think he's got to work through a couple of things out there where, decision-making relative to some pressure looks that I want him to get better at. But I thought his process was really good today. He stayed within himself. He looked under control in the situations that we created for him today. And I think when he does that and his drop is in rhythm, he's really good. So I thought we saw a good version of him. I think there's a better version of him out there.
Interesting. Calling a lot of timeouts is the Nuss bus. But it seems like everything is on schedule with Garrett Nussmeier, and that he's kind of fitting into the mold of that starting quarterback that you knew he could be when he got to campus here. I'm excited to watch him play coming up in a couple of Sundays. I think he's going to have a really, really nice year. I think he could be a top 5-6 quarterback in the SEC. And back in the first hour, I put quarterbacks in the SEC into tiers and had Garrett Nussmeier right there in the 3rd tier of quarterbacks. And a lot of that's just based on the fact that he hasn't played very much. That will change pretty quickly here in this season, and I think that LSU is going to be just fine with Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. A position that I'm not as comfortable with right now is defensive back, and Brian Kelly talked about it, evaluating the DBs.
No, I think what you're doing is you're giving a lot of guys an opportunity. I think we read too much into the first group that goes out there. Look, there's going to be injuries, and that's part of this game. You have to have as much confidence as the next guy going in. If a guy, pulls a hamstring in the first series, that next guy has to be somebody that can go in and play at the highest level. So, I think it's much more about any guy that's getting a first or second team rep is a guy that we believe that can come in and help us win a championship. So I think if you don't see him in the first or second rotation, two deep and maybe a swing player, then he's probably not ready yet. And I say yet because, there are some guys that kind of begin to blossom a little bit later, but whoever you've kind of seen out there in the back end of the defense at this point, those are the guys that we're trying to get ready for USC.
So that's Sage Ryan. That's obviously Ashton Stamps. That's Major Burns. It's Juwan Johnson. That's Jordan Gilbert. That's Jordan Allen. And then you go to Jair Brown, J.K. Johnson. Like those are the guys we've seen with the 1s and 2s. That's a group of somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 guys. and that's going to be the guys that you're going to see. And that is probably the biggest pain point for me looking at this opening matchup with USC, with Lincoln Riley, with that offense, and with that group of players. You've got guys who are coming off injury who hadn't played very much, like Jair Brown and J.K. Johnson. You've got some guys that are moving positions. Sage Ryan's back and bouncing back and forth. Jordan Gilbert's coming off of an injury and hadn't played in a long time. Jordan Allen has not played very many meaningful snaps. Ashton Stamps was out there a lot as a freshman, but that defense wasn't very good. So I don't know how good that scar tissue is. But it's just, there are just questions up and down that group, and it's baptism by fire because you're not opening with Rice in Tiger Stadium, who you're going to beat by 50. You're going to go against one of the best minds in all of college football right out of the chute, and those guys have got to get ready to go. So they got 2 weeks to do so. That's our look around Brian Kelly's thoughts from yesterday to set the schedule for this week. The Tigers did practice today, but we're not permitted to go in. Tomorrow, on Tuesday, they do have practice. We're not allowed in. Wednesday, they practice. We are able to go in for the first part of practice. That'll be the last day we can take photos and videos. And then practice in Tiger Stadium on Saturday. But it doesn't say in our release whether or not we're allowed to go to that. So we'll see. But as far as access that I know we get this week, Wednesday, we will certainly be out at practice and have a report for you. Looking forward to that very, very much. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.